Hello everybody, welcome to this fourth video about my tier list of Star Wars Unlimited, where I'm trying to rate every single card in the game. And today we're going to talk about green-black, so Command Villainy. One of the most powerful aspect combination in the game, in my opinion. Let's start right away with our very first card, Admiral Piet. So Admiral Piet is one of the best late game 2-drop in the game. So what I mean by this is a card that is very cheap, but its impact on the game really does not matter until the moment where you can actually play a card that costs 6 or more, which makes it a card that is very weak in the early game and very strong in late game. It's a bit of a weirdo because as a turn 1 play, he's obviously very weak, as a 1-4 stat line doesn't really allow him to trade with any other unit in the game, which is a big problem, especially against aggro. But as the game progresses, it starts to become more and more relevant, and in late game situation, it becomes a very big threat that your opponent has to kill fairly quickly. So the big question is, how do you actually play Piet in such a way that he can make it to the late game so he can use the ability? And the answer to that question is probably don't play it on turn 1. I think Piet is a card that I think is stronger when you actually wait a little bit before playing him and actually playing him in moments where you think he's going to be relevant. So, for example, is a very good card to pull out of Vader, as it allows it that it's going to reach the late game, and then once again, a Piet that is left alive can be a massive issue, because if you have built your deck with a lot of 6 resources unit that benefit from ambush, the card giving ambush to very big units is just extremely high value. Notably, it has excellent synergies with a card that has been dominating the late game with Reinforcement Walker, as it has a trigger when played and a trigger on attack. So you're playing, you get a first trigger, with the ambush you get to attack again, get double trigger. Just extremely relevant, and there's just so many cards in the game in general that benefit from having ambush. Ambush is one of the most powerful trade in the game. So one big complaint that I have about Piet is that, generally speaking, green-black deck don't need a better late game. They're already some of the most powerful late game deck in the game. So having a 2-drop that makes their late game even better does not really benefit them so much. They would rather play 2-drops that allow them to improve their aggro matchup, or 2-drops that allow them to keep them alive, not a 2-drop that allow them to win the game even more when they're in late game, when they're already in good position. So from that sense, it's a bit of a win more card, and it's not a card that I would necessarily recommend in a green-black deck, even despite the potential of that card, unless you are playing in a very specific meta where you're trying to fight all the big decks. With all that being said, it's also a very good sideboard card that will benefit you very much. I like to have this as a sideboard card because I can play this as a card I can play on turn 1, and against certain type of decks, this card can stay alive and have a very big impact in late game, and sometimes I can just play it late in the game and then benefit from his ability. So he's also an Imperial and an Officer, which are 2 very relevant keywords, which also helps him a lot. So with all that being said, so he has, by the way, he has also some sweet synergies with Fed Fire Spray, notably, and basically anything that doesn't have ambush. So why do I rate it? I think I'm rated to B tier. I'm gonna rate it between Moment of Peace and Regional Governor. It's not an auto-include by any mean, but in certain decks and in sideboard it can be a very, very relevant card. I like to put it in B tier. So it's relatively low B tier, of course, compared to the more the 2-drop here, which I think are a bit more auto-include. The Arc 170 and the Info 4 Admiral Piet is a bit. As I said, there's a big difference of power level between the high and the lows, the high B tier and low B tier. Next, we got General Taggy. So General Taggy is a card that's supposed to be that's supposed to make you want to play a Trooper Swarm deck. The problem is, even in a dedicated deck, it's not that impactful, and having 3 Troopers on the board, having 3 Troopers on the board is not that easy to do at all. And so you can think this as a kind of a medal ceremony, but that is a bit more, that costs 2 resources, so a little bit more difficult to use, and only works on Troopers, which is a very limiting factor. Most of the time, realistically speaking, General Taggy is only going to give 1 experience token, and when that happens, that doesn't feel very good, and overall the card feels very weak. Basically, my big takeaway from this card is that if there is a deck that ever wants to play, plays a lot of Troopers and works very well, Taggy would be a force to be reckoned with. But for now, this deck does not currently exist. We don't have this. First of all, aggro swarmy Villainy deck don't really have much support right now. Basically, Villainy as an aggro archetype has not really been pushed by Fantasy Flight Game, at least in Spark of Rebellion. So there's just simply not enough support for him to work, and he's not powerful enough to carry the archetype by himself. So for now, I don't think he's very playable. So I'm going to put it in D tier. Obviously, this card has a lot of potential for the future, and I can totally see this card rising in power and becoming a strong card. But as of now, the deck that is supposed to work with Tag just simply does not exist. Also, I have to say that generally speaking, black-green is not really the color you want for swarming the board, because right now black-green is very much a color based on the ramping and late game. It's not a color combination that is based on trying to swarm the board. So there's a bit of a disconnect between what the color combination wants you to do and what the card does. And for all those reasons, despite the card having some strong potential, at the moment it is currently not really playable. I'm putting it in D tier. Next we got a Seasoned Shore Trooper, which is a classic 2-drop that 2/3 for 2 is not great, but the ability to become a 4/3 when you get 6 resources or more is extremely relevant and makes Seasoned Shore Trooper a real threat in the later stage of the game. And reaching 6 resources with a ramp deck is not that difficult to do. So personally, we can draw some parallel between the Admiral Piet and Seasoned Shore Trooper in a sense that it's not a great 2-drop, but it can become much stronger in late game. I think Piet is kind of a more extreme version of Shore Trooper. If left alive and with the right cards and the right deck, Piet is really strong, very powerful. Shore Trooper is not as extreme. It's not going to carry you a game and flip a game around like Piet can do, but is much more easier to turn on. All you have to do is get 6 resources, which in a RAM deck is not that difficult to do. Also, I believe that generally speaking, in the early stage of the game, a 2/3 stat line is better than a 1/4. It at least allows you to trade with enemy 3/2s, and so for all those reasons, I think Seasoned Shore Trooper is a card that, even though it's not necessarily better than Piet, it is at least easier to put in your deck. And that's the reason why most black-green deck will have a tendency to play Shore Trooper in their deck. It's not exactly an auto-include. For example, I've seen Boba Green decks going away from Seasoned Shore Trooper, but I think it remains a pretty good card, and a card that you're going to see as a turn 1 play in many decks. So for all those reasons, I will place it in the A tier, in the B tier, sorry, probably below Inferno 4. Another thing that I wanted to mention about Seasoned Shore Trooper is like it's a card that is really good with Overwhelming Barrage, because Overwhelming Barrage really start to become a threat when you play it with a card that has 4 attack or more. And Shore Trooper is a very cheap, low commitment way to get a 4 resources units on the board. So that's another thing I wanted to mention. Next we got Emperor Royal Guard. Before that we got the Emperor Royal Guard, yeah. And this unit kind of was not seeing so much play, but obviously the introduction of Palpatine as a leader has turned this card into a pretty big powerhouse. Being a 3/5 is a big difference compared to being a 3/4. There's a massive difference between 3/4 and a 3/5. There's tons of things in the game that have 4 attacks or deal full damage, especially very meta-relevant cards. So at the results, Royal Guard, has become an absolute staple in every Palpatine deck. Basically, Emperor Royal Guard is one of the big reasons to play Palpatine. If this card did not exist, Palpatine would be pretty much unplayable, I think. And obviously a 3/4 that can potentially gain Sentinel is by itself very playable, and that's the reason you saw people playing Royal Guard even before Palpatine as a leader was revealed, because sometimes it's just a 3/4 for 3 Sentinel, which is very good just by itself. Just to give you an element of comparison, Sublord Guard as a 3/3 Sentinels sees a lot of play, so obviously 3/4 Sentinels is better. Obviously, and this is where the problem comes with this card, the Sentinel keyword is not guaranteed at all, and having an official is not something you're always gonna have, simply because not all officials are super strong. Actually, most officials, Imperial officials, are often worse than non-official ones, in my opinion. So you often have to make some pretty big sacrifices to play a lot of official in your deck, and even then, the Sentinel status is not guaranteed. And I think this is a strong limitation for the card. So obviously, a great card in a Palpatine deck. Palpatine, though, I don't consider Palpatine to be a top tier leader, to say the least. So that's also another factor that will harm the rating of this card. Overall, I think I'm going to put it in B tier. It's a solid card in a right deck it's a card that is playable. Probably would be C tier if Palpatine did not exist, but since Palpatine exists, I think there's enough argument to put Emperor Royal Guard, and I'm gonna rate him probably below Callus. Yeah, I think this is a good place for him. So what hurt his rating is the fact that obviously it's an S tier card almost in a Palpatine deck, but what hurt his rating is the fact that Palpatine is not a super competitive leader right now, and the other thing that hurts his rating is the fact that the Sentinel status is not guaranteed at all. Even if you're playing quite a bit official, and you have to hurt your own deck to be able to run that many officials, because most officials, in my opinion, I just rate most officials a bit lower than the non-official 2-drops. Next, we got one of the most infamous card in the game, Super Laser Technician, also referred to as DJ Laser, because he looks like a bit of a DJ with his purple screen. And Super Laser Technician is the quintessential RAM card. Is a 2/1, turns into a resources, and very important, it turns into that resources ready, which is a pretty big deal. That means that whenever you use energy conversion lab, you can actually send him, sacrifice him right away to something, sometimes even kill something, and get to ramp at the same time, and benefit from that resources right away. So this is very relevant. So Super Laser Technician is considered the best ramp card in the game, and it is the best ramp card in the game most of the time. There are some situations where I prefer resupply, and I'll explain this in details when we get to resupply, but for now, let's just say that the entire green-black archetypes is based on that card. It's the card that makes all the black-green control decks that you've seen possible. Without this card, basically, Villainy would not be as good as it is, so there's almost an entire archetypes, almost all the control decks are based on this card. Like the resource advantage that he provides is just incredible. And ramp is very strong in Star Wars Unlimited for a pretty simple reason, is that ramp not only allows you to play bigger cards, but it also allows you to get to your leader faster, and that is extremely impactful. even in a deck that doesn't have that many expensive cards, like for example Boba Green, the impact of being able to ramp into your Boba Fett 1 turn earlier alongside your Fire Spray 1 turn earlier, your Barrage 1 turn earlier is incredibly impactful. Star Wars Unlimited is a very tempo-based game, and being able to get extra resources to play your big threat faster and deploy your leader faster is simply just one of the strongest things you can do in this game. And for that reason, Super Laser Technician is well deserving of his S tier status, and I'm going to rate this card over Power of the Dark Side and Luke Skywalker. It is one of the most meta-defining card in the entire game. It's just an incredible card. And it also has many synergies. You can, of course, there's ways you can play around Super Laser Technician by basically giving nothing that he can die into, by basically playing in space or just trying to ignore him. But there are decks out there that can even sacrifice him. Like for example, if you're playing Vader, you can ping your own Super Laser Technician to ramp anyway. If you're playing Palpatine, you can sacrifice him to Palpatine's ability. He's actually one of the best units to use on Palpatine's ability. So all those factors makes its card just incredibly powerful. And a card that is an absolute auto-include in every Black-Green deck. Not only is it an auto-include, but also those decks are based on this card. They are built around that card. That's how powerful it is. Next we got Gramble Talken, which is basically a card advantage machine. It gives you a 2/3 that allows you to draw 2 additional cards, Imperial cards. Something that is very weird if you're coming from a different card game background, but is very true in Star Wars Unlimited, is that card advantage does not matter nearly as much in this game that it does in any other card game I've ever played. And the big reason for this is because you draw 2 cards per turn, which means that even in situation where you're out of card, you're very likely to be able to redraw enough card to play. Of course, card advantage still matters. It gives you more options, gives you more stuff to do, so it's still a very good thing to have, but card that basically sole purpose is to give you cards are usually not very playable because you are giving up tempo in favor of cards, and that trade-off is usually not worth it in this game. Unfortunately, Gramble Talken kind of belongs to that category. Is a card that really purely gives you cards, but doesn't really give you much of anything else, at least for the price that it costs. Costs 4 resources and is a 2/3. That's a very bad ratio, of course. And the card that it gives you doesn't really make up for that, because once again, you are giving a lot of tempo in favor of card, which is not a trade-off you want to do. Especially in the context of black-green decks, which are relatively slow decks, generally speaking, that already have a very strong late game and don't necessarily need to draw a lot of cards. All they need is just get to their big card and just drop their big cards and win the game. So, is there a place for Gramble Talken? So another thing with Gramble Talken as well is like it only picks up Imperial units. So you need to have a critical mass of Imperial cards in your deck. So, no, Imperial cards, not Imperial units. So there's a couple of Imperial events in the game. But basically, there's that means this is a strong deck building constraint, as you need to have a critical mass of Imperial unit to make sure you're not whiffing from the card. Make sure you get your 2 cards every time you play them. And also, sometimes you don't get to pick up the important card that you really want to draw. For example, Overwhelm Barrage, one of the best cards you would want to grab from Gramble Talken. Most likely you can't grab it because it's not an Imperial card. So it's a kind of fake quality card that doesn't really work. So all in all, do I think Gramble Talken is unplayable? I don't think he's unplayable. There's a place for him, notably in the sideboard, if you are going to be playing a very grindy matchup. Like you're playing, a very control versus control, and you want to scale your opponent, you want to out resource your opponent. You're going to play Gramble Talken and you're going to draw a bunch of cards, and you're going to get ahead. And if you draw like very powerful late game card like Devastator, Relentless, suddenly you have a lot of gas. So there's some context where you can justify Gramble Talken, especially in the sideboard, as an anti-control card. So if the meta becomes extremely control oriented and everybody starts playing control and it's control versus control, I can see people starting to consider Gramble Talken in their sideboard just to give you even better late game. So I'm going to put this in C tier just for that potentiality. Sorry. Oh my god. Anyway, moving on to Rook. So Rook has been a card that I was really in love at the beginning, and then the more I thought about it, the less excited I was about it. He's basically a guy that has Death Touch, so any damage that he deals is enough to kill the unit that he attacks. Only works on attack though, and also relatively hard to kill, 6 HP and a shield. One thing I don't like about this card is that his ability does not work against... First of all, it only works against ground unit because obviously it attacks against ground. So if your opponent doesn't have any ground unit, then you're left with a 3/6 for 5, which is really bad. And it doesn't work against leaders. So if your opponent does not have anything else than a leader on the ground arena, then the card just feels extremely bad. So there are situations in which this card is really, really strong. But there's also a situation where it's very weak. So it's a very unbalanced card, and it's definitely a card that people are going to have very different opinions on it, because depending on the experience, because there's definitely going to be some scenario where this card is amazing, and some scenario where this card is really, really bad. So it's a hard card to judge. It's a card that definitely gets better if you're playing Energy Conversion Lab, because giving it ambush allows him to attack something by surprise, which makes a big difference, because it's a card that is relatively easy to play around once you know it's there. But if it's arrived right out of nowhere, it's a problem. So the fact that it needs an ECL to really perform is also a problem, because once again, it's a card that you come into play, it doesn't have a massive impact on the board. So I'm not a big fan of Rooks. I definitely think there's going to be some scenarios where he's very playable in certain matchups. Another thing as well that I don't like about it is that this card is kind of supposed to be kind of an anti-Luke Skywalker thing. Luke, as an archetype, not only as a card but also as an archetype, is meant to be playing a lot of very big dudes. You're playing Luke Skywalker, you play Obi-Wan, a lot of very high health units that are very hard to kill. But the problem is with Rook, Rook does not get through shield. So if your unit is shielded, it will just make the shield fall off, and it will not kill anything. So shield is a really good counter to Rook. So the card is also very bad against aggro, as it does have an immediate impact on the game. His Death Touch ability is pretty much useless. The aggro deck can just ignore him. As there's only 3 attack, it doesn't put big pressure on the opponent's base. So all that said, I think I'm going to put Rook in C tier. It remains a card that can be very oppressive in some situations, so I like to put it. I'm going to put it high C tier. I'm going to put it between Bendu and Academy Defense Walker. It is playable, but I don't think it is particularly exciting, and I think there are better options in the 5-drops. But there's certain meta, certain matchup in which it's very strong, so you got to respect that, of course. Next card is the Gladiator Star Destroyer, which used to be a card that sees a lot of play, but kind of got pushed out of the meta by better cards later on. Very decent stats. The Sentinel in space is quite relevant, because especially if you play Villainy, you don't really have a lot of Sentinel cards. Sometimes you even have to play a card that like System Patrolcraft to get access to Sentinel. So if you are playing a green deck and you're really missing stuff in space, I think Gladiator is a playable card, as it really allows you to stabilize the space arena sometimes with the Sentinel. With all that being said, I still think that the card that got mostly outscaled by better cards, and it simply just doesn't have much going on outside of the Sentinel that only works for 1 turn. So it is playable, but it is not amazing. I'm going to put this in C tier, and I'm probably going to put it... I think I prefer it over System Patrolcraft. It's cost 2 more. Yeah, I'm going to place it... I think this is a good spot over the Ghost. Next, we got Darth Vader as a unit, commanding the First Legion. This card is the best 7-drop in the entire game. I'm going to be very straightforward. Not only because the card by itself is very strong, but also because it is in the context of a green-black color combination that has the ability to ramp, so get to this Darth Vader faster. So the context of being such a strong card in such a strong color combination that enables him to go into play faster because of the ramp, makes this the best 7-drop. You could make an argument that Luke in a vacuum is a stronger 7-drop, but I think in the context in which this card is in, Darth Vader end up seeing more play and being just a more powerful card. And the thing is, it's only going to get stronger because there's always going to be cards that are going to be released, like Villainy cards, that are going to be great pull for Darth Vader to combine into. Right now, there's already, of course, it combines best with Cell Block Guard to give like a Sentinel. Combines great with Death Trooper. That allows you to combine the 5 attack plus the 2 damage from the Death Trooper to deal 7 damage. Combines great with Royal Guard if you're playing it in a Palpatine deck. And obviously it can fetch Boba Fett, 7th Fleet Defender, so it's also a great card in the yellow combination. So it's really just an amazing card. If you're playing 1-drops, it can pull a 2-drop and a 1-drop as well. That also can be very powerful if you're playing the Stormtrooper First Legion. Every color combination, whether you're playing in red, yellow, blue, doesn't matter. There's going to be something amazing to do with them. And is just an excellent card that has an immediate impact on the game. If it gets dealt with, it has provided so much value that it virtually doesn't matter. It's an auto-include in. It also has the Imperial and the 4th keyword, which are 2 relevant keywords. There are also cards like Vader's Lightsaber that work specifically with them. There's just so much support for this card. It just has everything. In my opinion, it is one of the best cards in the game. It's one of the best 7-drop in the game. So obviously it's gonna go right up there. It's obviously a very different card than Super Laser Technician, so it's a bit difficult to say which one is better. I'm going to put it below Super Laser Technician because I think Super Laser Technician does something that no other card really can do. Darth Vader, even though he's the best on that category, there's many cards that do something that can be judged as similar. Like people in the past used to be playing ATST with Ambush. But yeah, it is obviously an amazing card. And well deserving of the S tier spot. The next card is a Blizzard Assault 8080. Big boy. I think it's the highest stats in the game, 99 for 8. Unfortunately, no immediate impact on the game. An ability that is very situational. Requires multiple ground units to be there and 8080 to attack into them. They only give because it costs 8, you can't use it with ECL. With this card with Energy Conversion Lab would be amazing, but since ECL is not available for him because he's too expensive, then he has to rely on Piet if he wants to get Ambush. So very slow card, expensive, and no immediate impact on the game. I think having no immediate impact on the game whenever you cost 8 is a deal breaker. And also there are better options, even in green. They are simply just better things to play for 8 resources. So there's just simply better cards to play in general than this. It's not unplayable, but there's just better options. So it's gonna be D tier. I'm gonna put this below the Consular Security card here. That sounds great. Next we got Relentless. Relentless is sort of the late game kind of anti-control card because it basically cancels the first event that gets played. So it's very difficult to deal with for a deck that plays a lot of expensive events. And that is a good quality to have when you put whenever you are in an 8/8 that can put such a big pressure. So Relentless is a powerful late game finisher that is mostly going to be a good card against other control decks. So most likely it's going to be either a sideboard card or a card that you bring for a specific meta. So I think it's a solid card, and it's surprisingly powerful in the game. But it is obviously it's very bad against aggro. It's not going to be good against everything, but that's kind of true for all super expensive units anyway. So Relentless, definitely a card that in certain decks and certain matchup can be incredibly oppressive. And I think for that reason it deserves to be in B tier. I'm going to put this relatively low B tier. I'm probably going to put this below Piet, but maybe over Entrench. By the way, Entrench is a really good counter to Relentless. But yeah, it's a good card, but it's most likely a sideboard card or more of a niche card that you will play depending on certain meta. Of course, if you're playing sort of super late game ramp deck. So it is situational, so you could make the argument that it should be in C tier, but I think that in the right situation it has such a high impact that I think it's deserving to be in B tier. Next we got a very similar card, Devastator, which in my opinion is also a card that is kind of the super ultimate late game card that will do a lot for you. With that being said, 10 resources is a lot. Even in the control mirror do not necessarily get to that point. But when you get to that point, it's obviously very powerful. There's a very big difference between 9 resources and 10 resources from my experience. Really, 10 resources is really tough to get to, even for a ramp deck. So overall, of course, the card is also what I consider to be a sideboard card. It's a card that you're going to be helpful if you want to, basically you're playing the mirror control and you want to get even better late game, and you want to basically improve your control versus control matchup by having those super pushed end curve. This card is going to stabilize the ground by dealing 10 damage to it. It's going to stabilize the space with the Sentinel. It dies to a lot of things. I mean, there's a few things in the game that can deal with it quite well, like obviously Waylay, Vanquish, even like as I said, an Entrench. You play an Entrench on it, can't attack the base, but it has an immediate impact on the game, so I think those weaknesses is very forgivable. So yeah, a very powerful card for the late game, but most likely once again it's a bit niche because it has to be played really in the as a way to really get yourself like a better late game. I find the cards currently to be stronger than Relentless. Relentless is even more specialized because it's really against deck who play a lot of very expensive events, while Relentless is just a very powerful late game card against almost everything. I'm gonna place it over Vigilance here. I think it's a mid B tier card. It's a strong card, but can't play it in every deck. I find the Avenger to be better because Avenger costs 1 less, which is a big deal, and Avenger the Overwhelm, the 10/10 stat doesn't really make that huge of a difference. However, the fact that Avenger can trigger his ability every time it attacks is very relevant. So overall, I have a preference for Avenger. Also, Devastator doesn't play too well into shields. Avenger does not basically ignore shield. So I prefer Avenger as a late game card if I have the option between the two. Sometimes I play both. You can definitely play 3 in the main deck and then add a couple of Avenger, Devastator. But I think Devastator is more a card that you want to put in the sideboard, while Avenger is a very main deckable card. Next, we got the Emerals Legion. So remember what I said about card advantage? Well, this is pretty much what this card wants to do. Spend 2 resources to get some units back into your hands. When you got multiple units that died, you play this, you get multiple cards back. But it's a card draw that is not only situational, because you need to have a couple of units that die to actually play it. And once again, it has the same problem as I said. It's you spending tempo to get cards, and that's not a good trade-off to make in this game. Obviously, you can use it whenever let's say you play a Vader, the Vader dies, you get the Vader back into your hand. That can be a strong play. But you need to make sure that you have 2 resources available when the unit dies, because obviously you can't get the card back after. You have to play the turn the unit was defeated. So that's a pretty strong limitation. And all of this makes this card, in my opinion, pretty unplayable. I felt like this card was meant to be used as a way to counter Super Laser Blast. So Super Laser Blast basically kills everything on the battlefield. You play this card to get all of your cards back. It's okay, I guess. It's like you could draw a bunch of cards. Is that really something you want to do in this game, having a conditional card draw? I don't think so. I think you're better off drawing a lot of cards in other ways. Like if I really want to draw a card, I would rather play something like Gramble Talken that gives me a body, and that is going to be easier to play most of the time, not as conditional. So I think this card is going to be D tier. I'm going to place it relatively low. I would rate it under Search My Feelings. Yeah, probably something along those lines. I really don't like that card. Last but not least, we got Overwhelming Barrage. This card has been the best card in the game. When I first started playing the game in September, it was already the best card in the game. And now we are basically the 15th of February as the moment I'm shooting this video, and it still is the best card in the game. It's just incredible. It allows you to deal a lot of damage that you can spread as you want between different units. It's the ultimate game stabilizer that allows you to kill multiple relatively large units in one go. So yes, it requires you to have a unit on the battlefield, and preferably a unit that has 4 attacks or more. But when you do, it's just the incredible amount of value, because you'll be able to kill multiple small units, and then with the unit that benefited from the +2/+2, you can just attack and kill a strong unit after that. So it just completely whips the board in your favor, and it's very rare to be in a situation where you can't make good use of this card. It's useful in every single matchup. The +2/+2 buff is very relevant. You can either kill a bunch of stuff and then attack with a buffed unit and deal a bunch of damage to the base, or you can kill a bunch of stuff, soften something that is very big, and then finish it off by attacking with a boosted unit. It's just so incredibly powerful. There's been a lot of cards that have been made recently that can kill multiple units at once, like Super Laser Blast or Bombing Run, but none of those cards come even close to what you're able to perform with this card, and how easy to use it is. So it is, in my opinion, one of the reasons why Black-Green is one of the best color in the game, and it is obviously going to be a S tier card, and I'm going to place it over the Super Laser Technician. Even this could be argued. But Super Laser Technician, once again, hard to compare this card with other cards, because it's obviously kind of a support card rather than something that you're going to be that's going to make you win the game, obviously, like a Vader or an Overwhelming Barrage could be. So by the way, when people saying OB, they mean Overwhelming Barrage. It's such a card that sees such a high amount of play that obviously people are going to be referring to with an acronym. And that's basically it for the green black card. As you can see, we added 3 cards to the S tier just with that color alone, but nothing on the A tier. Interesting. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I'll see you next time. Well, next time we'll talk about the Heroism command card.